Dame Dash just threw a hard pass at Jay-Z's potential return to recording, and the timing couldn't be more pointed. While rumors swirl about Hov stepping back into the studio after years away from solo music, Dame decided to publicly question the entire premise. Not just whether it's a good idea, but whether anyone actually cares at this point. It was over 30 years ago, he said, on a recent podcast appearance, essentially dismissing the notion that a Jay-Z album drop carries the cultural weight it once did. This isn't just noise from a random critic. Dame Dash was there at the foundation. He co-founded Roc-A-Fella Records with Jay-Z in 1996. They built that empire together through the 90s and early 2000s. So when he's publicly questioning the relevance of a Jay-Z comeback album, it lands different. It's not hate from the outside. It's a critique from someone who was literally on the inside, making the magic happen, and then watched it all implode. The controversy centers on a fundamental question. Does a Jay-Z album in 2025 or 2026 even matter anymore? That's the gauntlet Dame just threw down, and he's not alone in thinking it. Dame's comments came during a broader conversation about legacy artists returning to music. He specifically contrasted Jay-Z's situation with other legends who've managed successful comebacks in recent years. According to Dame, Jay-Z's moment has passed, not because he's lost his skill, but because the industry and audience attention span have shifted so drastically since his last substantial solo project. He referenced the 30-year trajectory of hip-hop itself, suggesting that nostalgia only takes you so far when you're competing against fresh artists who are currently setting trends and dominating streaming platforms. What makes this particularly cutting is the implication embedded in Dame's words, that Jay-Z has been running on fumes of cultural cachet for a while now, riding on legacy rather than creating new movements. He didn't explicitly say that, but he didn't have to. The phrase, "it was over 30 years ago," carries weight precisely because it suggests that whatever peak Jay-Z reached is ancient history by modern standards. The internet didn't exactly miss Dame's shot. Twitter and Instagram blew up within hours, with entertainment commentators and casual observers alike weighing in on whether Dame was speaking truth or just airing old grievances. Comment sections split into predictable camps. People who agreed that Jay-Z's time as a relevant recording artist is long over, and people who argued that Jay-Z's cultural influence transcends album cycles. He's a business titan, a cultural figure, someone whose relevance extends far beyond whether he's dropping bars every quarter. But here's where it gets complicated. Jay-Z hasn't actually announced a comeback album. There are whispers in the industry, speculation from music journalists, reports that he's been in talks with producers and engineers. Nothing confirmed. So Dame's timing raises an interesting question. Is he responding to genuine plans he's heard about through the grapevine? Or is he preemptively shooting down an idea that might be floating around Hov's camp? Some industry insiders have suggested that Dame might have more information than what's public. His connections in hip-hop remain extensive, despite years of legal battles and business disputes with Jay-Z and everyone connected to Roc-A-Fella. If there genuinely are album plans being discussed, Dame would theoretically in a position to hear about them. That would make his comments less of a random take and more of a calculated public move, putting pressure on the project before it even gets announced. Others counter that Dame is simply capitalizing on a trending topic to stay relevant himself. He's been less prominent in hip-hop discourse over the past several years compared to his heyday as a polarizing figure always willing to speak his mind. Throwing a controversial take at Jay-Z's potential return generates headlines, podcast clips, and conversation. It's not cynical. It's just how media works now. You say something bold, it gets clipped, it spreads, and suddenly you're part of the cultural conversation again. Interestingly, Dame didn't frame his critique around jealousy or bitterness about their past business split. That would have been the easy read and probably the lazy one too. Instead, he positioned it as an observation about industry mechanics and audience fatigue. He's essentially saying, this won't work because the game has moved on, not because Jay-Z's washed. It's a more sophisticated argument than just, that's trash, or he should stay retired. That sophistication might be why his comments have resonated with some music critics and industry analysts who've been quietly wondering the same thing. When's the last time a legendary hip-hop artist took time away and came back to commercial and critical acclaim? It's harder than people think. The rules of engagement have changed. Gen Z listeners might know Jay-Z's name, but they're not necessarily waiting on tenterhooks for his next move. They're following whoever's hot right now, and right now, that's not a former president of Def Jam making guest appearances at music festivals. Producer and music executive perspectives have been mixed. Some insiders worry that Dame's comments will damage any momentum a Jay-Z project might have before it's even announced. Others see it as unavoidable noise, the kind of thing that happens when you're considering a major move in an industry where everyone has opinions and nobody keeps their mouth shut. Jay-Z hasn't directly responded to Dame's comments, which might be the smartest move. Engaging would elevate the criticism and validate the narrative that he's concerned about the project's reception. Staying silent lets it blow over while maintaining the mysterious vibe that's been part of his brand for years. He's known for ignoring critics and operating on his own timeline. That approach has served him well in the past, though it also means letting someone like Dame land the last word, at least for now. The timing is particularly interesting given Jay-Z's recent focus on other ventures. He's been occupied with Roc Nation's expansion, his sports business interests, Mondelez deals, and various philanthropic initiatives. Recording albums isn't exactly his priority anymore. So the question becomes, would a Jay-Z album even be a priority for him? Or is this entirely speculation that Dame felt comfortable weighing in on because he knows it probably won't happen anyway? That's where Dame's comments take on another dimension. If he's right about Jay-Z's irrelevance in the recording space, then Jay-Z probably knows it too. Hov's too smart not to understand market positioning and cultural relevance. Would he really spend time and resources on an album project that Dame's already roasting before it exists? It seems unlikely, which means Dame's critique might actually serve as a reality check, a public articulation of doubts that Jay-Z might already harbor privately. Some observers have suggested that Dame's comments reveal a deeper frustration with how Jay-Z has evolved. There's a certain irony in that Jay-Z transitioned from being a prolific recording artist to being a mogul precisely to avoid exactly this kind of situation, where he's dependent on album cycles to maintain relevance. He built an empire so he wouldn't have to. So when Dame says, it was over 30 years ago, he's arguably critiquing not Jay-Z's current capabilities, but his departure from being a necessary voice in hip-hop. The broader context here involves how hip-hop legends manage relevance in 2024 and 2025. Nace released King's Disease and its sequels with Hit Boy and received critical praise. Rakim has dropped music. Even Raekwon released the Purple Tape reissue collaboration projects. But these artists aren't trying to reclaim chart dominance or current cultural moments. They're making music for their loyal audiences and the hip-hop press that covers legacy work. That's a different lane than Jay-Z has ever been comfortable with. He's always positioned himself as culturally central, not as a legacy act making elder statesman statements. Dame's critique touches on that exact uncomfortable position. Can Jay-Z come back as a current artist, or would a comeback album inevitably position him as a legacy figure? That's a distinction that probably matters to someone with his ego and sense of importance. It's the difference between Jay-Z returns to recording and Jay releases a legacy project. One implies relevance. The other implies nostalgia. The podcast clip where Dame made his comments has been clipped and reposted across TikTok, Twitter, and YouTube naturally. The engagement rates are solid, which tells you something about how much casual listeners also wonder about the relevance question Dame raised. It's not a niche take. It resonates because a lot of people do think about whether legacy artists should keep chasing current relevance or accept that their moment was real and distinct and probably won't be replicated. What's particularly sharp about Dame's approach is that he didn't personally attack Jay-Z. He didn't bring up their falling out or the business disputes or any of the personal friction. That makes it harder to dismiss as sour grapes and easier to engage with as legitimate criticism. You can disagree with his assessment without attributing it to jealousy or resentment. That's actually a smart rhetorical move, whether intentional or not. Some people have compared this moment to when Kanye used to make controversial statements about the music industry and legacy artists. But there's a key difference. Kanye was usually trying to position himself as the future, the disruptor, the next thing. Dame isn't doing that. He's not saying, I'm the one who should be making moves, or I'm the artist to follow. He's just saying that nostalgia marketing doesn't work the way people think it does, and that Jay-Z probably shouldn't bank on that strategy. Music critics have started picking apart the deeper implications. Some are asking, what does this conversation say about how we value artistry versus legacy? If Jay-Z made an album tomorrow and it was genuinely great, innovative, culturally relevant, would it matter that he's been away for years? Or is Dame right that the cultural moment for that kind of album has simply passed, regardless of quality? It's a philosophical question dressed up as gossip. There's also the streaming angle, which Dame didn't explicitly mention, but which underlies the entire conversation. When Jay-Z's early albums dropped, they were competing on a completely different marketplace. Radio, MTV, print magazines, physical sales.